are starting to join us. Good morning, everyone. We'll get going in just a second. Just waiting. I'll give it about 10 more seconds for people to jump on. Okay, we've got some good numbers so far. So cool. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this CHRO South Africa and HR Indaba Network webinar. My name is Nick Smith, and I am a sales manager at CHRO South Africa. Just some housekeeping. If you can please all just say hi in the chat, but please select all attendees and panelists and let us know where you're from. You are also welcome to ask any and all questions you may have during this webinar, and we're going to do our best to answer all the questions during the Q&A towards the end of the session. Okay, so today we will be discussing zero talent waste. There is an inherent mismatch between the value of recruitment assessments and their cost. The research is clear that CV-based variables such as years of education and job experience are poor predictors of job performance. Current selection approaches are costly and very often impacted by subconscious biases. The traditional approach to recruitment is clearly broken and not in line with the benefits offered by today's 4IR technologies. So zero talent waste is about fairness, transparency, and equal opportunity in the recruitment process. Zero talent waste harnesses the power of technology to provide uncapped recruitment assessments and data analytics at a fixed cost, assessing all applicants at the beginning of a selection process to fully harness the power of data and support HR with objective decision-making. In the session today, our panelists will introduce zero talent waste. They'll share a case study of its impact on Randstad, the world's largest recruitment agency, and we will hear experiences and how zero talent waste transformed BillerudKorsnäs' approach to recruitment. Joining us in this conversation today, and I'm going to
Okay, so I think we've lost Nick. Let me carry on with the introductions. My name's Benjamin Buckingham. It's really great to have you all here. Real pleasure to get to speak to everybody. Just to introduce myself, I'm the Managing Director of HFM Talent Index in Africa. And as Nick indicated, I've got Emma Engebretzen here, who we're going to be chatting to. She's the Country Manager of Assessio in Sweden. And they've really changed the game in terms of talent. And she'll be sharing with us about Randstad. And we've got Fabian A. He's head of senior talent acquisition partner at BillerudKorsnäs, and they're a global user of zero talent waste. And what we're here to talk about is the effect of uncapped or unlimited assessments on the HR process. So when you talk about uncapped or unlimited assessments, it seems like quite a small change, but actually the impact is pretty large. It's got a pretty significant impact on our access to talent quality as well as HR efficiency. So in terms of the group of people that we've got with us, we've got some very interesting delegates. We've got delegates from South Africa, from Nigeria, from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Mauritius. We've got a pretty big spread of companies from less than 50 people to 50,000 employees. But most of the people with us are leaders of HR leaders of organizations from the 50 to 5,000 band. And what I find very interesting is that a lot of us share the same issues. So we're going to start with a bit of a poll. Nick, if you'll take us through the poll, but if you can give us a bit of insight into how effective your recruitment process is.
Yeah, we'll give the guys about sort of 10, 15 seconds to get this going. Yeah, obviously the numbers are yeah, they seem to be quite one-sided, which I guess is quite a good thing in terms of where the conversation today is going to go. So let's just 10 more seconds. Okay, slow down. Cool. I'm going to end the poll there. And results have been shared. Have you got them there, Benjamin?
Yes, no, that's great. I'm assuming everyone can also see them on my screen. Well, I think that's very interesting. I think what we've got in front of us here is really the reason why we're speaking. We do find that some organizations do have pretty efficient recruitment processes, but in general, we find that organizations are looking to improve their talent acquisition and talent selection processes. And that's really what we're here to speak about today. So I'm very, very pleased that we'll get to answer some of these questions. Right, so I think it's fair to start with a bit of an introduction. I think it's fair to start with a bit of an introduction. So, who is HFM Talent Index? HFM Talent Index, we're specialists in the field of online talent solutions. We provide technology to both small and large organizations. And what we do is our technology is really about improving the effectiveness of talent within HR. As a business, we focus on selection, on development, performance, talent analytics. Really what we're about making tech work for talent. In this conversation, we're going to be focusing more on the recruitment side, but as a business, we cover the whole sort of remit of talent. Our organization is deeply rooted in psychology. We've got a team of psychologists, and that help inform our decisions when it comes to both software as well as consulting. And I would say that as a business, we really know about people. We've got a research competence. Our assessments are always normed and validated for local use. Some of the organizations we work with, for example, would be the HBCSA, COTAN, DMV. These are the organizations that generally validate the validity and effectiveness of our sorts of tools. As a business, we bring together the experience of Assessio International, founded in 1954. Assessio is the market leader in the Nordics in terms of assessments. HFM Talent Index International, which is part of the Assessio group. HFM Talent Index was founded in 1997 as the market leader in the Netherlands. And we set up the African office in South Africa in 2016. And we're a distributor to the Assessio group. That means we've got access to all of the technology in the Assessio group. And combined, we've got 100 years of psychological experience to rely on in our business. So I'm going to ask Emma, maybe just to, since we've got Emma on the line, I'm going to ask Emma to take us through Ascend and the Assessio group very briefly.
Thank you, Benjamin. And thanks for having us here. Yeah, Assessio is, as Benjamin said, we've been around since 1954 in Sweden, and we have ever since worked with evidence-based assessments of different types. So a couple of years ago, we realized that the recruitment industry is broken, that we use poor methods for finding and choosing talent and match between work and the individual. So we built the Ascend platform, and with help from the technology development, made it possible. But we also realized that our business model was broken, that in our industry, traditionally, we charged clients per test or per candidate, which did not bring the behaviors that we need to see in order to work for zero talent waste. So our mission and our vision is to strive and work for a labor market where we have zero talent waste. So what we did is that we, I think it was about 6 years ago, we implemented a new kind of disruptive business model to drive these behaviors among HR and among organizations. So instead of charging per candidate or per assessment, we started with a more fixed fee with unlimited usage. And by doing that, we've seen result that more and more goes towards working for their talent waste. So in less than 5 years, we have more than 3 million tests done in the platform, which is not only amazing for what it does for the labor market and for fairness when it comes to recruitment, but also is a huge platform, of course, for data and for constantly improving these methods. So yeah, that was short about Assessio.
Thank you, Emma. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So what I would like to do is I'd like to take a look at the traditional approach to recruitment. What is being done in general by organizations? I mean, we've just seen that there's been a pretty big indication that we're looking for efficiencies in our recruitment process. So I think it's fair to take a look at, what are we currently doing? I expect that the process on the screen here is pretty recognizable to you, if not the whole process, parts of it, probably something that you'll be quite familiar with. I think it's also fair to note that in Africa, we've got quite a large talent pool. There's a lot of people on one hand. On the other hand, there can tend to be a perceived skill shortage, and there's this mismatch between numbers versus the difficulty of filling certain roles. And that's also one of the challenges and elements that we look at resolving when we look at zero talent waste approaches. So when we look at the traditional recruitment approach, the first step is generally some form of screening. We've got a number of candidates that we're working with, a number of applicants, either a large number of applicants that have applied for a particular role, and we need to screen these down to a manageable number, or we've got a smaller number of applicants and we've got to screen them out. We've got to screen out people that are not really applicable for the role. Now, often this is done using an applicant tracking system or ATS. Just as often it's done quite manually, it's quite labor intensive. But at the end of the day, what we're doing at the start of the process is we're working with information that's been provided to us by the candidate. So that's things like CVs, references, all that information that we start the process with. The result of this is we create a long list, and that list is the list in the second phase that we start to interview. The interview step has got quite a lot of work. There's generally a number of interviews. They're either structured or unstructured, competency-based, just depends on how we approach it. But organizations then tend to develop a short list, and that short list is a list of people that they feel probably have the capability to do the role, and they would like to then focus on this list to choose one or some of these people. We find that there's generally another round of interviews, generally with higher up people in the organization, such as line management executives. And we find that assessments are generally used. I would say that more often than not, organizations are using assessments. I'm sure some of you are. And this is in the form of assessment centers, psychometrics. And these assessments are applied either to the whole shortlist, maybe to one or two final choices. Sometimes they're applied after the decisions are made to validate the rest of the process. But the bottom line is when we come to the decision making, the decision is made based on information that is gathered throughout this process. So what are the effects of this? So the effects of this is there's quite a lot of manual work that goes on at the beginning. So let me just move out of the way there. And there's also quite a lot of reliance on information that's provided by the candidate. So we're talking about CVs, references, etc. Now, these pieces of information are generally not that predictive when it comes to role performance. And we're going to take a little bit of a look at that later. And there's quite a big reliance on interviews. We get the question a lot, how do we deal with those cases where people are good at interviews but bad at the job, or people are bad at interviews and good at the job? And that's a concept called social desirability. But how do we manage for those cases where people in interviews want us to believe that there's something that they're not? So we tend to apply a lot of gut feel when it comes to these processes. And the outcomes of this are there's quite a high cost, high cost in internal time for this whole process. There's quite long recruitment cycles. We'll see that on the next slide. We tend to invest quite a lot in unsuitable candidates. That's represented by the red avatars going through the process. Unsuitable candidates tend to make it all the way to the end. And this results in poor fits and poor hires, as we can see was indicated by the poll. My view is technology is not really being used as efficiently as it can. Assessment popularity is growing, but we're seeing a start to a shift now of a data-first approach. So let's look at the return on investment. So I mean, there's a lot of studies about this around, but it's very interesting to see some of the numbers of how these recruitment processes actually hit the bottom line at the end of the day. The bottom line is that hiring is expensive. It's not free. Even if all the work is done internally, we can have costs of thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of rands. It takes 1-2 months on average, which in order to process a hire. That's got a pretty big opportunity cost within the business, as well as impacts on our employer brand when candidates are waiting. But the real cost in the ROI is the cost of a bad hire. Now, when you look at a bad hire, especially for an important role in an organization, we see costs in the range of $82,000 or 1.2 million rands. And the one thing that is also very important to think about in terms of ROI is not just the direct cost, but the indirect impact on the whole organization of a poor hire in terms of morale and team culture. So I think we'd like to do another poll just to get an idea of where are you spending your time and money in the organization in terms of the recruitment process. Nick, if you could take us through that.
Okay, there we go. So yes, so where does your organization invest the most time and money? It is multiple choice. So options are sourcing applicants, manual screening, CVs and references, etc., actual assessments, interviews, or cost of bad hires. We'll just keep that up for about another 5 seconds. Some interesting figures coming through. Just give it a couple more secs. Okay, and we will end it. We'll end it about now. Okay, showing the results. Okay, there we go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nick. I find the results very, very interesting. I can see it's a very interesting spread. Obviously, there's a lot of energy going into finding the right candidates. And one can understand how that then feeds into energy being spent on manual screening and references and things like that. I see that 1/3 of the cost is going into bad hires, which is very interesting considering the last slide. And I see that we are spending some of our resources on assessments. And I think the whole point of zero talent waste is to maximize the effectiveness of that spend on assessments. Right, I'll close this. Let's do that. Okay. So now let's get to the good news. So what is zero talent waste? The whole principle of zero talent waste is to assess as early as possible in the process. And it's about using that data to support the remainder of the recruitment process. Zero talent waste prioritizes the value of people's talents upfront. It's all about not wasting talent in the recruitment process. So zero talent waste is about using technology to get objective insights for all candidates as they go through the process, irrespective of the volume of candidates. So as Emma was saying, it doesn't, it should not be focused on how many candidates go through the process. It should be focused on getting the best value for every candidate that goes through the process. So we solve this by using technology at the start. So zero talent waste focuses on solving the traditional recruitment process by really putting people's innate talents first. What this does is it reduces subjective bias in the whole process. By doing this, we lead the process. Instead of with manual, we lead it with measurable, objective criteria. It's about inclusiveness. We can include more and as many people as we can because we don't screen out people based on unnecessary, non-predictive elements. It's about being efficient. It's about putting technology to work at the front of the process. Let tech do the hard work first, and then let's focus on the results when we invest our own time. It's about fairness. It's about transparency. It's a consistent process. It's a process that's based on data, and it's a process that's designed to support HR with this data, support HR with this objectivity. And ultimately, what zero talent waste is, it's about performance. it's really about finding and hiring better talent more effectively. So to do this, what we've got to do is we've got to turn that talent acquisition pipeline that we looked at earlier, we've got to turn it upside down. What we need to do is we need to put tech to work at the start of the process. We need to lead with reliable insights, not with interviews and supplied information. That doesn't mean to say that we want to get rid of subjective input. I mean, subjective input is absolutely critical when it comes to hiring. But what we want to do is we want to balance this with objective perspectives. So if we take a look at the panel on the right, we can get some ideas of the organizations that implement zero talent waste principles. Emma is going to be chatting to us about Randstad, Fabien about BillerudKorsnäs, but there's a number of other brands that you'll recognize on the right, that are benefiting from the principles of zero talent waste. So the question is, what do we have to work with when we are looking at a recruitment process? What's the validity of the information that we have? So what I've got on the screen here are the results of a study. It's a meta study over 85 years of data done by Schmidt and Hunter. It's a very well accepted, very well respected study. And what it does is it shows us the correlation between the particular criterion that's listed and job performance. So how well do each of these elements relate to the ultimate performance of an employee in a role? And the way that it works is the higher the number, the better the correlation. So what we can see here, as an example, is that graphology or handwriting is completely unrelated to job performance. I really hope no one's using that as part of the hiring criteria. I highly doubt it. But what we see in terms of the traditional approach is that we focus initially on elements like years of education, job experience, reference checks. These are things that we get from CVs, which are scientifically shown to be not that valid when it comes to the reliability or their ability to predict job performance. Why do we use them? Well, they're there, they're easily obtainable. And our gut tells us that there's something about them that is, that tells us something, and that's not wrong. They do have some indication, but the indication is not the best indication that we can have. So what we need to do when it comes to zero talent waste is we need to lead with the items that are most predictive. So things like general mental ability tests or IQ or cognitive tests, personality tests, competency perspective, structured interviews. These are the types of elements or criteria that are more valid and give better predictability. That doesn't mean to say that we don't want to use the subjective elements at the bottom, but we want to make sure that we lead with the more objective perspectives. So how do we do this? We basically got to turn the assessment process upside down. So to do that, we assess at the start. And the whole point of a zero talent waste approach is to assess first and assess last. Assess as many people as we can. Because it doesn't cost us extra to do additional assessments, let's put technology to work for us and let tech assess everyone that comes through the process. I mean, I think it's fair to say that some roles do have some hard criteria that people have to meet, and we don't need to put everyone through the process. For example, if you need a particular level of education, there might be no point to go through. But the bottom line is, we want to get as many people through this process as possible because it lets the system, it lets technology do the work for us. Also, what it does is it gives a better candidate experience. What we can then do is we can give constructive or useful feedback to anyone that engages with the system because that feedback is available. We can give something back. The second step is to then rank the candidates that go through the process based on how well they match the particular role. So the idea is to rank them on objective criteria, such as competencies, their cognitive or mental ability, as well as their risk behavior. So once we've got a list of candidates ranked in terms of their applicability or suitability as people for the role, we then structure our interview processes based on interviewing the candidates with a higher fit as a priority. And we use the insights that we gained at the start of the process to support the interview process. So at the end of the process, when we're making decisions with all the knowledge of the information that we've gathered throughout the process. And we know that the people that we're speaking to have got the right characteristics. Basically, when we get to the interview phase, we have 3 times as much information about a candidate than we would have got from 3 interviews without a valid assessment to start with. So I think the bottom line is that, assessments are becoming more and more commoditized. The real value is in the ability to get use out of data or utility out of data. From a commercial perspective, what this really means is that we need to unlink the cost of doing assessments from the number of people that are assessed. So our tools for assessing people need to become a fixed cost on the H&R profit and loss. And this then breaks the link between the number of people assessed as well as the cost of the assessment programs. So what actually happens in a zero talent waste environment is that the more people that are assessed, the lower the cost of talent acquisition, because we get to spread the net wider and we've got scientific perspectives supporting the whole process. So we really find that we move from assessments being a gate-kept checkpoint because of cost to data-driven decision-making. So I do want to talk a little bit about how we do that. In South Africa, HFM Talent Index, we offer zero talent waste solutions using the Ascend platform. Ascend is a software as a service platform that's delivered by Assessio. It allows us to provide unlimited assessments at a fixed cost to organizations. All candidates that engage start with a short set of online assessments, and as per the previous slide, they're then ranked according to objective criteria. And Ascend then provides information, both on, both in detail as well as in summary that supports the whole HR process. So, I kind of want to just give you a pretty high level perspective of what we look at. I don't really want to get into a whole product conversation. If anyone's interested to talk about that, feel free to give me a shout afterwards. But basically, at a high level, we need to look at a few things. We need to look at personality. So who is it that we are engaging with? And we need to look at their mental ability. So what is their problem solving ability? And we use these, we measure these using assessments developed by Assessio called MAP for personality and Matrigma for cognitive. MAP is based on the Big Five. It measures all factors of the Big Five, and Matrigma is a non-verbal cognitive assessment. And what we then do is we use that information in order to understand how well somebody fits a particular role based on their competencies, as well as based on risk behavior. What we can then do is we can have access to both summary and detailed information in order to support the process as I showed. So what I would like to do is I'd like to hand over to Emma to take us through some of the return on investment that we see from the sort of use of the process based on practical experience.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think you can. Yeah, we can see. Okay, so it's animated, so but if I talk, then you press. Okay.
I'll get it.
Okay. So when you work according to this or according to research and start assessing early and look for potential and not focus so much on the previous performance or previous experience, but rather on the potential on how to show those behaviors that is needed in this specific role. Then there are a lot of effects that you can find, and I will just highlight some of them that we've seen together with our clients and that we also can see in research. But one of them, and I saw that in the poll previously, this was one of our largest costs. There was screening and sourcing for candidates. And this is one of the big upsides, I would say, from an HR perspective or from a recruiter perspective, that it's very time saving. And we have cases where recruiters and HR organizations have saved as much as 90% of their time just by assessing early and make sure that you spend the time on the right candidates rather than your time on many candidates. So that is one return on investment that you can see. Another one is retention, with a better match between the role and the one that you recruit, your employee. With a better match, we also see that people tend to stay longer, and being very transparent on what the role really is about and what behaviors that are critical in this position. By doing that, you can also better match the individuals that has an easy way to deliver or to show these behaviors. So retention is another thing that we can prove is effective. If we take the next one, and this is of course, I would say the core of everything and why we do this, is when we recruit, we look for future performance. And we want to find someone that is able to deliver the behaviors and the results that we are looking for in the specific role. We have a lot of cases on this. I would just like to highlight this one from a sales organization, where we could show that through matching or choosing those candidates with a higher match towards the behaviors that is needed in the role, those individuals also performed better in the role than those with a lower match score. And we could see as much as 25% increase in their performance when it comes to sales revenue. Also, one big topic here in Sweden, I would say right now, is leadership. And we are in a situation where, with the pandemic going on, where we also see a shift in what leadership is all about. And so having effective leaders and leaders that are successful in the roles is something that a lot of our clients at least work with every day. And so leadership effectiveness is something that we also look for and make sure that this method also helps with. So when we look at peer reviews, we can see an increase in effectiveness with leadership for up to 35%. And then, as Benjamin said, by working like this, we also make sure that we don't hire people with toxic behaviors, and that we can make sure that we can leave those behaviors outside of the organization instead of taking them in. And especially when you look at leadership, we see that when you use poor methods for selection, like interviews, we are often very our gut feeling, and we are very attracted by people with a look or act, in a confident way. But we also know that confidence is not the same thing as being competent as a leader. So that is also one thing that we see when you work like this.
Thank you, Emma.
Pleasure.
So I think you're going to also take us through this slide in terms of full potential unleashed. What I'll do is I'll say.
Yeah, so thank you. It's very, so when you work like this, and when we work with our clients on how you, as Benjamin said, you flip the process, and you, instead of assessing as I used to say with our clients at least, is that HR traditionally in Sweden at least has been like goalkeepers, where a lot of the recruitment process has been on the manager to do, and then when the manager has found their top candidates, they go to HR and they say, okay, is this a good fit or not? And HR is like a goalkeeper to decide whether or not this candidate should enter. And then sometimes the manager do that as they want anyway, since they decide on who to recruit. So when with working like this, the HR department rather become like a source or pool of talent. So where the manager says or comes and say, I have a vacancy, I need to find two or three candidates that I should meet for an interview that has a good fit for this role. Can you please help me? And that's kind of transforming HR and talent acquisition, I'd say, at least here. So by doing that, this is how you do it. You start early on with, as early as possible, you put the personality tests, and the cognitive ability, and that is the problem-solving ability. How easy do I have to learn new things? Yeah, those things. So that you start there, and then by assessing or setting your behaviors for the role, then you can also find the match score. Then which of these candidates have a high match score that I should spend my time on, and then you can add the risk behaviors, and thereafter you have a good view on what candidates to actually look deeper into. Which ones should how many candidates do I have time to meet in an interview, or which candidates should I meet for an interview? And you can also look at CVs thereafter. So as early as possible, you use the tests.
Great, thank you, Emma.
Yeah,
so,
I think it's still me.
Yeah, it's still you. Yeah, so you're going to take us through the case study of Randstad. I'll leave it to you to go.
Yeah, so we were asked to share a case study, and this one is very interesting, I think. Randstad was one of the early adopters of this way of working. As I said, 6 or 7 years ago, when we started with this new business model. So Randstad is one of the largest recruitment agencies in the world, and we work with them in Sweden. And they had a vision of having their consultants, that they were having the view from their clients that their consultants would be the best consultants in the industry. And they were working very thoroughly with grades from the client. So when a consultant had been working for 2 months, the client was asked to give them a grade. And Randstad collected this, and they found a widespread of consultants getting high grades until those getting low grades. So of course they asked themselves, okay, how can we make sure that we have consultants that get higher grades? So they started looking for that themselves, and they looked in demographics, like if they could see any patterns when it came to previous experiences, gender, age, name it. They couldn't find anything. So they turned to us and asked for help. So what we did is that we implemented, or let the candidates or the consultants take a personality test, a big 5 tests. And during 2 months, they didn't use the results for recruitment. We just collected the data, but they were still working as they did before when it came to match between the matching process between consultant and client. And then after 2 months, they were asked again, okay, could you please grade this consultant? And we also added a sick leave rate and a managerial rate from the Randstad manager. And now when we looked at the data, we could see very clear patterns that the ones scoring lower on the match with personality and the job fit, they had a higher absence when it came to sick leaves, and as much as 29% difference between those scoring low match towards those scoring mid and high. So that was one of the findings. And the other one, when it came to quality, is that when they started recruiting and using this method for recruitment, they can also see that the group that got lower grades from the clients decreased with 30%. So by using the personality assessments also as a decision base or base for decision, they managed to get their consultants as a group to score higher from their clients than before. So that was the basic need that they had, the challenge that they had. Then we also looked at how did it affect the efficiency within HR and the recruiters. And we also found that their time declined and decreased, with 80% on how much they spent on each recruitment process, which of course made this process or their work more efficient. Both that they found better candidates, that they could make a better match towards the client's needs, but also that they could spend less time on each recruitment than before. So yeah, that was one case.
Well, thanks, Emma. I think it's just really fantastic to see how a large company like this is really benefiting from these principles. So Fabien, it's good to have you here as well. Being a user of zero talent waste principles directly. I think I'll leave it to you to take us through what your experience is with using zero talent waste.
Thanks, Benjamin. Finally, I get to say something. I actually used to work at Randstad before, so I got my Ascend certification while I was working at Randstad. So I know how they work with the tool. But as said before, my name is Fabian A, and I'm working as talent acquisition partner at the BillerudKorsnäs. And I'm also the global process owner of the recruitment process. And now during my presentation, I will try to keep short so we have some time for some Q&As afterwards. But I will tell you a bit who we are and what we do, just so you know, how we are working with the Ascend platform and what effects and trends we can see so far. And I started 3.5 years ago to build the internal talent acquisition function with all the processes and tools around it, such as employer branding, onboarding, new interview templates, reference checks, and so on. And of course, last but not least, to work more competency-based. And that is where our partnership with Assessio comes into the picture. And I will tell you more about this soon. The first short about BillerudKorsnäs. We are a world-leading provider of primary fiber-based packaging materials. In other words, we own and we buy a lot of trees that we cut into chips, we boil them, and then we make board and paper from it. And just to put into context, you guys have probably heard of Tetra Pak, the world leader in food processing and packaging solutions. And we are the biggest supplier of material to Tetra Pak. So that's basically what we do. And we have 4,400 employees, from paper mills in the northern Sweden to sales offices in China. And what we do is our mission is to challenge conventional packaging for a sustainable future. And the packaging material that we produce is meant to replace other packages that are not as sustainable, such as plastics. And we have been also named several years in a row one of the most sustainable companies in the world, according to Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And last but not least, just wanted to add something about innovation, because that's a big part of our DNA. And one example of how we challenge conventional packaging is the paper bottle that we are developing right now together with brands such as Coca-Cola, Carlsberg, and Absolut Vodka. And I'm sure that this will change the way we drink carbonated drinks in the future. And of course, you're more than welcome to Google for the paper bottle afterwards, if you're curious to learn more. But okay, so we have been working with Assessio since 2017, and it was around that time I started. And we as a company wanted to work more competency-based with recruitment. And we also wanted to become less dependent on external recruitment agencies. So we implemented the Ascend platform, and since then, completed MAP and Matrima tests are mandatory for all employments. And in the beginning, when we started with Assessio, usually we did the testing in the end of the recruitment process, maybe for the final 2 or 3 candidates. But the more we have worked with Assessio's tests, and in our strive to work more competency-based and unbiased, we have gradually started to test earlier in the recruitment. And this, I would say, is especially important when we have a lot of applicants. This can be when we are recruiting to our trainee program, when we recruit hundreds of summer workers to our mills, or just if we have popular vacancies with hundreds of candidates. That's not always the case, but quite some often. And one example is if we are to hire like a process operator. Often the requirements are quite low. Sometimes basically the only requirement is that you should have finished high school. And these kind of vacancies often actually generate hundreds of applicants. And when the requirements are that low, it's impossible to do a selection just by looking at their CVs. You need more data. And in these cases, I would say that assessing early is crucial. After we had worked with Assessio for a couple of years, and when both HR and managers became more comfortable with the tests, we wanted to take the next step in working competency-based. And at this time, we had also just launched our new leadership program called Sustainable Leadership. So therefore, we, together with Assessio, created the Sustainable Leadership Competence Profile. So now when we are to hire a manager to BillerudKorsnäs, we use this profile in the Ascend platform to get an idea of the person's potential to become a successful manager, basically, for a company. And what's good with this competency profile is that it can also be used for leadership development, because from the report you get the strengths and development areas and also suggestions for future development. And we are actually soon launching what we call the Sustainable People Program, our expectations on all our employees. And we will most definitely create a competence profile for sustainable people as well. And just, we haven't been measuring in the same way as Assessio yet. We can see some trends so far. And you know that these kind of things can be hard to measure also with hard KPIs sometimes. But we see some trends. And one very clear trend is that we have had increased leadership index 3 years in a row. And if this is probably not only thanks to the assessment or to the competence profile, but I'm pretty sure that it's part of the success that we assess for the potential for managers. So increased leadership. And we are also measuring the candidate experience. And we can see a positive trend there as well. And you could think that testing early could affect the candidate experience in a negative way. But so far, they are more positive than negative. And here I would say that it's important to communicate in the right way, put some effort in email templates to really explain why we do this, why we test early. It's because we want to work more competency-based, more objective, more unbiased, and so on. And last but not least, we have much lower recruitment costs now than before. Before we started working more competency-based, focusing on internal recruitment and so on. And of course, assessment is not only the reason, but definitely a big part of it, because working with assessment in-house and assessing early is a big part of taking the next step in our talent acquisition. So that was basically what I had to say. I tried to be quite short, so we have some time for some Q&As. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Fabien. Nick, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Cool. Thanks, Benjamin. If you'd like to maybe just stop sharing, and then we can all get back on screen, and then we can go through some of the questions. I think I've got just one or two that I need to find out from you guys. So I just want to start with Fabien. Fabien, how has using zero talent waste increased your access to talent?
Definitely in a positive way, because the thing is, what defines talent, and how can you find and evaluate the potential of a talent, during a recruitment process? I think it's very easy to be fooled, for example, in an interview, or not fooled, but to be charmed by a person's extraversion, and sometimes, to mix the social skills with talent. And we know that social skills and appearance are of great importance in an interview, but it's not always the same as who is best suited for the job. And assessment comes in as an important piece of the puzzle here. And if you can assess early in a recruitment, we know that those we then choose to meet in an interview, according to tests, have greater potential to actually be a talent. And also, another thing is that if we test early, we do not have to spend as much time on CV screening. And the time we then save, we can instead spend on, for example, sourcing of candidates, or to pitch ourselves as a company even more. And this will ultimately generate more talent coming to our company.
Awesome, thank you. Now, Benjamin, you've shared some amazing information with us today. But just from a practical perspective, how do we get started?
Yeah, I think the point is, as a software as a service solution, it's really turnkey. It's not a very complicated process to get going. So when we engage with an organization that wants to start on a program like this, there's two main steps. Step one is getting hold of a platform, which is delivered via the internet. It's all online. And then there's a training component. There's a short training course where we explain what we do and how it works. And then the real way to get going is, so we're talking about a couple of days to get prepared in order to start. And then generally, rather than making it a huge project, what we recommend is to start somewhere where you're going to get the most effect. So if you've got a particular role or set of roles where there's large volume you need, or you're having recruitment issues, start there, get that going, and then build from there. It's often a mistake to structure a huge project to bring 150 roles in to start with. You can create value immediately with the tools based on the fact that they're instantly available online.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Benjamin. Emma, as soon as you get sort of started, from your side, how long does it generally take to actually start seeing results?
Oh, that is, I would say it depends on how big you do this, it's all down to your baseline. You can see effects from your first recruitment, just from time savings and the candidate how you communicate with candidates, and so yeah, you can start small. That's always my recommendation, to start small and start where you are. So based on that, as a single recruiter, I see an effect directly, and as a larger organization, as Fabien just told us about, it's all about what baseline and what KPIs you set, and from there you go.
Okay, awesome, thank you. There's a question coming from the audience from Gift, quite relevant for the South African audience. Assessments are sometimes used to exclude potential candidates based on their race, gender, or disability. How do you make sure, as a recruitment manager, that assessments are fair to everyone? Who would like to give that one a crack?
I'll start off there. I think that is, the first point is that any assessment that is provided has to be demonstrated to be reliable and valid and fair, irrespective of sort of demographics. And that's the reason, for example, in this context, that we use a non-verbal general mental ability assessment. So the point is that what we're doing by using assessments is we are actually creating a fair process where we are looking into the innate characteristics and qualities or talents of people as who they are and how they meet the job first, rather than looking at information that is supplied on CVs and other, let's call them surface level criteria. So it is the assessments themselves that create inclusiveness, that create fairness, and create consistency in the process. And scientifically, we have an obligation to ensure that the assessments that we use are valid, do work, and we have studies that show that. I don't know if anyone else can answer that.
Yeah, should we move on? Cool. Thanks, Benjamin. Possibly to Fabien. Sort of what are sort of best practices? What pitfalls should we be thinking of?
I would say there's a lot of pitfalls when it comes to recruitment in general. And the thing is, assessing early is that you actually reduce the risk of falling into the pitfalls, since you won't fall for just a person's charm or that kind of appearance, but you also know that they have scored high on the tests and they are matching with the profile that you have created. But regarding pitfalls and what to have in mind, I would say that it's communication. If we assess early, or basically if we assess at all, but more important if it's early, since you assess a larger number of candidates, it's super important to explain why we do it. Because you can almost assume that the person who applied for your particular job has applied for other jobs. And if the other jobs also requires that you assess early, the person will have to do several tests before they even know if they can come to an interview or not. And if you communicate incorrectly in this situation, or if you do not communicate at all, you risk misunderstandings and a bad candidate experience. But if you communicate in the right way, you explain that it's about trying to be as objective and competence-based as possible, the test will help us with this, then it will instead be something positive. And if you also let the candidates get their test report, regardless of whether they go to an interview or not, which you do in the Ascend platform, then you have given something back. Yeah.
Boom. Thank you. Nombulelo, I hope I pronounced that correctly, asks, What happens if the best matches do not have the required qualifications or experience based on the advert?
Okay, maybe I'll answer that first, and then maybe Emma can also give her perspective. What we find is, because we are trying to reduce the number of people that we need to process, we often raise the bar for access to a particular role. I mean, bottom line is that, if there's a hard requirement to be a doctor, you need a medical degree. So you can't have someone without a medical degree being a doctor. So, there's some situations where, somebody might have all the right personality to be a doctor, but they don't know how to do the operation. So that's just never going to work. But a lot of times we've created artificial requirements, for example, to be, do you really need a degree to be a manager? Is a diploma sufficient? And so, this process allows us to sort of open our perspective a little bit, to be a bit more inclusive. But it also means that, if there is a particular requirement for a role, we would probably not include such a person in the process if they don't have a requirement. I don't know if you want to add on to that, Emma, from your experience.
Yeah, I agree. If there are basic requirements that is crucial for the role, then of course you should put them first. I know there are a lot of ATSs where you can do that, and if you have, so you don't, you only assess those with the requirements that you need. But just as Benjamin says, very often, at least what we see in Sweden, is that we have a tradition of raise the bar very high, so that we have high requirements, and we don't always know why we have those requirements. For example, you need 5 years experience in order to step into a certain role, and maybe we just need to ask ourselves, why do we need 5 years of experience when we know that experience sets very little of future performance? So just question yourselves there and make sure that I have the requirements that is actually needed. Do you need a degree? Of course, then only assess those that have that degree.
I think one more point I'll add on to that is that, we very much see the relationship between measured potential and performance. And so if you have two people that come into a role and somebody's got one person has the skill and one has the performance, the person generally with a higher potential can easily learn the skill, especially if it's the kind of skill that can be provided within the context of the business or within the training programs. And generally people with higher potential tend to have higher performance over time. So I think that's probably my last little bit on that answer.
Perfect, thank you. We are running out of time. Just a couple minutes left. There was just a practical question from LZ saying, is the platform able to integrate with the company's ETS?
Yeah, there are integrations between Ascend platform today and some ATSs, and that is always something that we investigate. So yeah, it is possible. Some already exists. Others could then need to be built.
Okay, perfect.
On the ATS there, depend on the specifics of the scenario.
Okay, perfect. So guys, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We have come to the end of this webinar. But just before we go, I just need to bring up a quick slide for our following webinars. So just bear with me. So we've done zero talent waste today. Next week we have a webinar brought to you by Talentsmith and Cameo, discussing is AI the future of recruitment. Got some great panelists there, as well as Walter Huber, the CEO of Cameo Video Recruitment. And then the following day, from one of our partners, Mercer, how to re-energize your workforce. Also some great panelists. So please, I'd love everyone to register for those, and see you all next week. But again, thank you to Benjamin, Emma, and Fabien, and thanks to everyone for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and thanks
to everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao.